How do you design accessible and inclusive digital products when your audience is everyone? Today, my guest is Hanna, who is a head of experience at Transport for London Digital and visiting lecturer at Royal College of Art. Hanna leads the team who designs digital travel tools for one of the largest transport systems that includes the oldest underground system in the world. Transport for London also has a long history of design thinking and artist collaborations. The iconic London Tube map influenced all other underground maps in the world. Today, Hanna will share how inclusive approach shaped the design process at Transport for London Digital, giving access to the right travel information to people on the full spectrum of physical ability. Also, how TfL Digital engaged with marginalized communities to create an app that could be accessed by everyone. And what could commercial organizations learn from Transport for London's inclusive design practices? Hi, Hanna. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hello. Hi, Irina.
Thank you so much for joining, and it's great to have you in this series called Inclusive by Design. And I'm really looking forward to talking to you about this TfL Go app. And very excited about this project, especially as it was designed inclusion first. So really excited to hear about that. But first, I really wanted to ask you about what was your journey to inclusive design and accessibility, and how did it start for you?
So I led design teams for many years now, and as you all know, in design, most designers nowadays are well aware of accessibility, and try to do it as work in accessibility as part of their daily life as designers. So it's not very new. It started many years ago. That journey, and I've worked with many designers on making sure it becomes part of their practice. So yes, that's kind of how it started, and I think we will talk about it a bit later. But what became apparent to me is that although the basics are there, although quite a lot of designers know what to do when it comes to day-to-day design tasks, there's a great potential in accessibility around innovation, and also really thinking about data and creating mainstream services that are going beyond what we need to do in terms of compliance. And we'll talk about it a bit more later on. But that is something that has been very exciting for me more recently.
Mm-hmm. And I know that you're working for Transport for London Digital. Could you tell me a little bit more about your role there?
So I'm the head of experience at TfL. I look after the design for all digital channels. That's the website, our new TfL Go app, digital displays and stations, which were also recently redesigned, and you can find them now in all tube stations. The travel bot that we have on online. So yeah, I look after all of that.
Fantastic. And I know that TfL has this great tagline, "Every journey matters." What does it mean in your day-to-day practice?
Yeah, so we look after, as TfL, as you might know, we not only look after the tube, which of course is still very much at the core of what people associate us with. We also, of course, look after buses, which is actually the primary mode in London for most people. But we also look after roads, we look after cycling, we look after the walking experience. So when we say every journey matters, it really is a very broad sense of responsibility that we have towards traveling, walking, cycling, taking the tube, taking the buses, traveling in London in general, and making the city accessible as a whole for everybody, so that you can take those opportunities that London has. You can see friends, you can see family, you can go to work. and it's been part of our brand, I think, for a long time, this idea that travel is not just getting people from A to B, but actually it opens up the city. It makes the city vibrant. It makes London what it is, an international hub. So it's part of the identity of London for us. So it's much, much more than just sort of making sure everything is working. It's about discovery. It's about excitement. It's about going out there and exploring.
Brilliant. And what's TFL's approach to inclusion? And for example, how do you make sure that all the different cases are a part of your design thinking, part of your prioritization process? How do you do that?
I think TFL in general is very passionate about accessibility. It is really core to a lot of the activities across the organization. It is difficult to do. It's not an easy task. And but I know that there are many, many people in TFL, far beyond my team for sure, who are very, very involved and very passionate about it and try very hard to make it work for customers. So it is sort of baked into our organization. It's very important, and I would say most people who work for TFL are aware of it, are trying to contribute to the overall accessibility of the network. And that includes a wide, like you just said, a wide range of activities from, making sure new stations become step free, making sure, the understanding of what inclusion means is broad. It's not just including severe conditions, but also understanding the complexity of accessibility and inclusion in the broadest sense possible, and making sure even day-to-day issues of inclusion are considered. So it's a complex picture. There are lots of people involved. It encompasses, the design of stations. It encompasses obviously our world in digital. So yes, in our team in particular, I think we'll get to that in a minute. Yes, we've taken a very broad approach. We set out to make it part of our overall digital proposition, to design a digital service that in the future, not all channels are quite there yet, but that in the future, rather than just thinking of it as an afterthought for compliance and meeting the regulations, we're seeing inclusion as something that's really fundamental to our digital service. And the approach we've taken in order to tackle the complexity that comes with it is that we've taken a phased approach. And we're looking at sort of 3 tiers. So one is that innovation is part of that story. So we're trying to look for new technologies. We're looking for new capabilities that come with new technologies that we can use for accessibility. That's one thing we're doing. The other is that we've started to really look at data, understand the data that people need, understand what we can do to improve the quality of that data, how that data is made available and live, and as is as accurate as possible. So that has been a huge part of our activity over the last couple of years. So that is a great part of what also now drives the step-free journeys in TFL Go. And then the third is just making sure that the design itself of the UI, the user interfaces we're designing, is inclusive by default, by which we mean that if you just have a mild, for example, visual impairment, you don't necessarily need assistive features to be switched on. You don't have to have dynamic type on in
Mm.
order to make sense of the information. The information is very well structured. We have taken out a lot of noise. The design overall is reassuring and calm because
Right.
we are aware that many of our customers who have accessibility issues often have a much higher level of anxiety as well. Something that came out of quite a bit of research.
Yeah.
So, in general, we're trying to reassure people using the app. We're trying to make sure everything is glanceable, straightforward, and if there is an issue, it's clear from the get-go. So the live data has become a key part in it as well.
Fantastic. So does it mean that a person with some impairments, but not very severe impairments, won't have to turn on any assistive technology because it's already in the design of the app, right? Do you understand it?
So if you're someone who, just has mild visual impairments, for example, you should be able to read most of the information in the app without needing dynamic type to be switched on. If you happen to switch it on, if you happen to have larger type, we crafted the layouts and the design to a great level of detail so that they can accommodate dynamic type very easily. So nothing breaks. We've worked really hard so that rather than just switching these assistive features on, we've spent a lot of time crafting how they work when they get switched on, so that transition is quite seamless. But you don't necessarily need it. In itself, the app is, for most people, quite accessible in terms of the user interface. The same principle, though, also applies, and that's important for people with, say, severe mobility impairment. So if you are in wheelchair bound, and that is really new and innovative, and it's something that just didn't exist before TfL Go, you can now use TfL Go to find information that up until now was available, but it was only available in printed maps, and it was available, of course, in other channels in terms of live lift status. But now you have that information together in one app at your fingertip. You can open the app. You can see whether the lifts are out or not, whether a station is closed or not, and you can then go into the station to the platform level and get very detailed information about the steps and the gaps that you might have to tackle, whether a station is just interchange only, step free. So it's information that normally you wouldn't have had in a mainstream service. So that is very new.
I see.
The other thing I would like to highlight is that if you do have, if you are, for example, if you have severe impairments, visual impairments, there are a few features that are worth highlighting as well. Rather than just switching voiceover on, what we did was, again, we focused on those features that would be particularly useful for people who do need voiceover. And so rather than reading out the map, for example, the app goes straight into those key features, and they are journey planning. So you can get directions. You also can get status for lines, and you can get your nearby bus arrival times. And if you do get to the station, if you do find a station and you go to the platform view of that station, it will read out the arrival times for your tube trains via voiceover, and that is very, very useful because it replicates the experience you would have as someone who can look at the dot matrix announcements on the platform. Yeah.
And how do you think catering for all these different scenarios for people with impairments, how does it affect the experience of people without impairments, for example?
I guess it just makes it because it's part just of what we do. It just makes it easier, for everyone to get sort of the sort of high quality underpinning, I think, service as well. So for example, give you an example. Um, well, I guess in terms of design, of course, it's just you know it's just clearer, it's just easier
Mhm,
to use, and so forth. So
mhm,
that's a benefit for everybody. But
mhm,
also in terms of the data work we've done, for instance, I think just the focus on quality and accuracy that we had to have for step-free journeys, that is a benefit for everybody else as well, because the way we deal with data is generally improving, and will benefit other customers as well long term. Um, in terms of innovation, again, once a
mhm,
feature, once an innovative feature is rolled out. So, for example, as you will see in a minute, in the app, we have a data-driven map of the tube. So, for the very first time, the tube map itself has been digitalized, and
mhm,
that means we can show a live version of the network, a live version of the tube map. That in itself is a huge advantage for switching to a quite detailed step-free map, but also longer term, it is a new way to mapping, dynamic mapping, and so it's an innovative feature that will benefit
mhm.
everybody.
Mm-hmm. And so, how do you feel innovation and, for example, accessibility or focus on inclusion? How are they connected?
Well, I think accessibility forces us to just think a bit further. It forces us to look at scenarios that are very difficult to tackle for the individual who has those
Mhm,
challenges. And therefore, it requires us to challenge ourselves and to just not assume that people will find an easy workaround. And
mhm,
I think in terms of travel apps and traveling, especially the intelligence that you need in the features itself is really driving innovation. So, for example, location-based services, this idea that you would go and get the right information at the right time wherever you are is particularly relevant in the context of accessibility. And there are quite a few sort of technology drivers, I would say, at the moment looking at that, and it's all emerging technology. It's not something that's been rolled out yet broadly, and it's difficult to do, but you can really see how it drives innovation, how people are thinking about it, how people are trying to make this possible.
mhm, mhm,
Again, I'm not sure we would be anywhere with the sort of voice services that we have nowadays
mhm,
without the
mhm,
need for people to have voice services.
mhm,
And we know throughout history, accessibility has always driven innovation. So it's nothing new really in that respect. So I think it's deeply linked, and it's yeah, it's a driver for innovation. Yeah.
Fantastic. And what do you think commercial organizations can learn from TFL processes of, including accessibility and needs and requirements of people with impairments and disabilities?
It's not about it's just about baking it into your daily activities rather than making it a side project, or
Mm,
something that comes afterwards, and that makes it easier for everybody. And
mhm,
overall it will just focus you on quality, it will focus you on uh, simplicity.
mhm,
So I think, yeah, maybe the word focus is right. Use
mhm,
accessibility as something that can focus you, uh,
mhm,
because it will focus you on what's important. Um, don't get overwhelmed by it. One of the very, very first things we did, I think that might be worth sharing, rather than looking at different conditions and instances of accessibility needs in isolation,
mhm.
we looked at the commonalities between different conditions,
I
and there
see.
are a lot of commonalities.
Mhm,
So
mhm,
so the guide the principles and the guidance we've developed within TFL, within our team, is fairly simple. It's about clear information.
Mhm.
It's about laying it out in a sensible way, making sure there's plenty of room to digest what you're looking at,
Mhm.
stripping away all noise and distraction, um, focusing on quality data,
Mhm.
making sure anything you do is not nothing is overwhelming or
Mhm.
confusing. So, and that actually ticks a lot of the boxes. It makes
Mhm.
it much easier for many people on the neurodiverse sort of spectrum. It makes it easier for people that have to deal with difficult situations where anxiety plays a key role,
Yeah.
and so forth. It makes it easier to find information rather than having to look for specialist apps or special
Mhm.
features, because it's just simply there.
I know you mentioned that the complexity of data, so that, for example, step-free journeys used to be mapped out on paper, but you also have, I'm sure, lots of different sources of data. How do you combine them? How do you make sense of all these inputs?
I think data is a really interesting topic because when we say data, often it's a term that suggests numbers or something magic that happens in the background that's very technical. But
Mhm.
actually, data is information. It is data is something that needs to be usable, that needs to be understandable. So just having data is not enough.
Mhm.
Just having a lot of data is not enough. What is important is that the data you have is something that can be understood by users.
Mhm.
So, to give you an example, if I have a piece of data that is just text and it has no metadata attached to it, and I don't have any reference data to link it up with other data sets in a meaningful way that would give me more context, that data is not very good. It's not very useful. If the data is not written well, if there are words or terms, if there's terminology that's not usable, or it uses metrics that are not usable for customers, then that data isn't very good. So data is about really understanding how we need to visualize and how we need to communicate
Mhm.
um, key options in a journey. So I'm here
Mhm.
right now. I'm in this particular situation. I need this particular bit of information in a very specific, laid out in a specific way. I need it to be visual. I need to look at it at a glance. I need to understand what it means. So data needs to be design driven. So if you're looking at data, you need to look at it from a design perspective. And I think that is also something that we've really started to do a lot more. And certainly my team, all the designers on my team are thinking about data and
Mhm.
thinking about the data that they need, rather
Mhm.
than taking data that's there. So what we've done is we've kind of turned it upside down. Rather than looking at data that's there and sort of just making it work in the front end,
Mhm.
we've taken the approach. Of course, we're still doing that as well. We take
Mhm.
the data, try to make it useful, but we've also started to use the design process itself to define the data that we need and collect and shape the data, future data that we need for our products.
And could you tell me a little bit more about how actually design informs data and how do you work together?
Yeah. So we work with many data teams, as you can imagine, and I would say what was a real shift over the last couple of years is that the design team now very proactively shapes data, shapes sort of the requirements for data. We are all the designers in the team are looking at what sort of reference data we might need, what sort of metadata we might need, how well the data needs to be structured, and what sort of language we should use, how we, what kind of data is useful to customers. And that is a real shift. And I think it kind of highlights how important it is that design is shaping data, because ultimately, of course, data needs to be of very high quality in order for us to be able to create those experiences that we would like to create. In the context of accessibility, data is really, really important. So having the right information at the right time in the right format, having the right information in a, described in a way so that it makes sense to you is really, really key. So it's fundamental that it is driven by design.
I think you mentioned in the beginning something about compliance and working with compliance to achieve inclusion. How did it work for you?
So as a public sector organization, of course, we do have to be compliant with accessibility regulations. So that is an ongoing process. We're basically constantly checking, making sure everything is according to the guidelines. It's a very straightforward process. We're testing our channels and we're making sure we're covering all the grounds that we need to cover. I think what's exciting is going beyond that. So again, like I said in the beginning, looking at innovative new technologies, looking at, crafting the design language, the global design language for all our services in a way that we don't even have to think about it, that it's just so inclusive by design that, we don't even have to worry about compliance. To look at assistive features as something that you can craft, that you can design for, rather than just switching those on. So I think going beyond this compliance attitude or mindset is very important. So rather than looking at it as something we need to do and we have to do and we just need to kind of make sure it happens, getting everybody behind this idea that it should be a driver for new things, for new features, for good design, for quality data. It's something to get excited about. It's not something we should just do because we have to, if that makes sense. So I'm very much in favor of those regulations. I think it's important that we have to do it. But as a design team and as a digital team, we've now taken the approach, for a few years already, to just broaden that idea and make sure we're using it for designing a very good digital service for everybody.
Fantastic. And how did you move? So you created, let's say, the first version of the app. How did you launch it? How did you test it? Because it's such a huge scale and so important for everyone.
So we launched in August 2020. Right sort of, at the high one. It wasn't the height of the pandemic, but it was in the middle of the pandemic. Dreadful times. And obviously we had worked on the app for some time. So the launch was interesting. We launched, and I think instantly it became clear that the approach we had taken actually was indeed very useful. It wasn't just something we thought would be useful. Obviously, we had tested it as well. But what was interesting was, during the pandemic, obviously lots of stations, for example, were closed. And so for the first time now, you could just have a look at the tube map and you could instantly see which stations were closed. You could just get this kind of view of the city in one live view, which was
Months. Yeah.
which was very new, which is something very new. So
Uh-huh.
since then, people have started to come back. People are now downloading the app, are starting to use it. We get very good feedback. We're very excited about it, and there's much more to come. I think that's worth mentioning as well. The product isn't done, of course. It's in a good, I think in a very good. There's a very good first release now out, which is covering all the important bits. But there's much more to come. We're very excited about it, and it will be an evolving product. It will be something that will stay with us for hopefully a long time, and will adapt and be tailored to what will come and what people will need in London to travel confidently and to travel safely and to explore the city, discover the city, and be part of this great city. So that's the approach we've taken. You asked me about research. So from the beginning, we had the view that, especially in the context of inclusion and accessibility, we had to connect to the community. We had to make people who will be users of the app with quite severe conditions involved in the design process from the beginning. One of the very first things we did before we did anything else, really, we had long conversations. We had what we call an ethnographic study. So we went and we spoke to people with, in this case, very severe mobility impairments in depth. We visited them at their homes. We spent a significant amount of time just talking and exploring how journeys are planned. And our goal was not just to understand the sort of practical issues that people have to deal with, which is the lift out of service? Where can I get this information? What do I do if I get stuck, and so on. But also to understand the barriers that come from having a history and a life of experiences. So understanding those fears and challenges that people have. And there is a lot of fear. We had people saying to us that they have never used a tube, ever. They never used a tube, ever before, because they just were too scared to use it. And that's really, that is very touching and very worrisome.
Yes, and also how do you shift this preconception?
Exactly. And one of our greatest fears was, because that was something that we also realized in the research, is that you're giving people a tool into their hands that might enable them to plan better and to potentially take that first step out into this network and using something like the tube, which is scary. And what if something goes wrong? So
Yes.
So the responsibility that comes with that. Yes, I think that really is something that we're constantly thinking about. So basically, Irina, what I want to say is, it was very important from us from the beginning to be with people, to take them along this journey with us, to have those conversations, to take it as a partnership rather than just us delivering something based on abstract numbers and needs. What was important for us is to take the community with us, to take the feedback. We're encouraging everyone who's using the app to feedback to us. Let us know how it works. Let us know if something doesn't work. Let us know if it's not clear. We had very good feedback from people. We had a lot of really detailed stories about how people navigate the issues they're dealing with. And we want to continue that process. It is not done. It's something that will evolve, that we will get better at. And I really encourage anyone who's seeing this video to please, if you do start to venture out and use TfL Go for your journeys, don't be shy. Come back to us with with suggestions. We might not be able to do everything, but we're trying really hard to make it work for you.
And what's the best way to share that feedback with you?
In the app itself, there is a feedback link where you can write an email to us. That will also probably become better over time. So you can always send us an email. You can always reach us also just on Twitter or on the social media network or social media channels. There are many ways to contact us. I think in the app, that would be probably the first step, just to use the app and then feedback via the app.
Okay.
One of the things that I also wanted to mention is, because this is the question we often get, is the bus network, of course, is very accessible already, especially if you have a wheelchair. Not that it's perfect, but it's very accessible. What's important to note, and why we focused on the tube so much, is the tube is still the fastest mode in to go over long distances, to have long distance trips. And we wanted to unlock that really for people who currently are not able to do that easily. I just think that's worth mentioning as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I'd love to see the app, if you could show it to me, and some features or some journeys.
Yeah, let me show you the app. As I mentioned, it has a live map of the tube, and that includes, of course, London Overground. It also includes trams. It includes the DLR and TfL Rail, and also the Emirates Airlines and Thameslink now. And you can zoom in, you can zoom out. The tube, okay, you see it's the entire network. And you can zoom in, and it's all data driven. The stations come in, and if you go even further, you can see the lines appearing. So it's a dynamic map. And the benefit of having a dynamic map is that at any point while you're using it, if you were going to need a step-free information or a step-free journey, if you wanted to plan a step-free journey, or if you wanted to just understand the step-free options you have, which is something that came out of the research we did as well, is a lot of people certainly with long-term mobility impairments, like to familiarize themselves with stations and stops. So we wanted to facilitate that as well. So if you want to explore what's possible to do and you want to understand what you can find, you can just simply switch this tube map to a step-free mode.
Fantastic.
Now you can see the entire network in its step-free shape, and you will notice that we have taken out the stops that are not step-free in order to make it clearer and easier to understand what your options are. So all the stops that you do see on this map right now are step-free in one way or another. And here you just saw King's Cross getting an alert. So these are our live updates. So right now there must be a lift outage and reduced access. So if you were going to King's Cross right now, you know there's an issue, and here you go. You can find out what the issue is. Aha, Circle Line, there's something going on. This seems fine, actually. I'm not sure what's wrong. There you go. This is wrong. Piccadilly Line, no lift.
Right.
And if you go in, you can see now Piccadilly Line, no lift access. Okay, that's not good. So normally you would have step-free access from street to train. At the moment, that's clearly not possible. But as you can also see, and that's worth noting, again, you can see whether if you were going to Piccadilly right now, whether you would need a level access point. So these are special points on the platform that you would have to find in order to board a train. And find out what boarding method you need to look out for. Does it have a manual ramp that's being operated, where you might need staff to help you, or does it have this level access point that you need to find on the platform? You get also this really quite detailed information about the gaps and steps that you would have to tackle. So is it a large gap or a small gap? In this case, it's quite a small one. So
Right.
probably good for most wheelchair users.
Mhm.
And also,
Sorry. So is it for wheelchair users to estimate, for example, how their wheelchair will
yes,
work? Yeah, in this situation.
exactly. So in this situation, the maximum would be 85 millimeter for a gap, and the maximum would be 50 millimeter for a step, which is considered quite good. There are instances where the gaps in the steps are larger, and some people can tackle them, but not everybody. And it's very individual. And having that information available, and again, in a mainstream app, is very helpful because you can then get a feel for what's possible for you, and you can get a sense for whether you can tackle this particular challenge or not.
Right. And I guess it will also could be beneficial to, for example, young parents with a pushchair and
Yes.
anyone who is using,
Yes. So if
pushchairs.
if you have a pushchair, if you just have a, or you have a temporary impairment, say you have a broken leg, here again, very easy at a glance, you can see what you can do. It's just the same information. It's just that if you do have a wheelchair, you can go in and you can get very detailed information if you needed it. But as you can see, it very easily scales up from, I just need to know, can I somehow use the network right now with my pram, all the way to, oh, but I have actually a wheelchair, I can't do certain things. And in that case, you can go in and get very detailed information about what's possible. I also wanted to highlight that what's very interesting, I think, and again, something very special about the app is that for the very first time now, you can very easily see which stations are interchange only accessible. So, for example, here, Oxford Street is accessible, not from the street. So you can't go into Oxford Circus step-free. But what you can do is you can interchange between the Victoria line and the northbound Bakerloo line, or the Bakerloo line in general. And that is information, again, that's opening up opportunities that you might not have been aware of without this information. So previously, you might have missed that information if you just looked at the regular tube map.
So do I understand correctly, the stations that have the icon with the wheelchair, they have step-free access from outside of the station to inside of the station, but others have interchange that is step-free?
Exactly. So the types of step-free information we have, this is step-free to train. This is aligning with the iconography we have on the print maps as well. So if you have a dark wheelchair, and you can see this here, it's step-free to train, which means it's the most accessible form. But also we have step-free to platform. Right now there's a part closure, so it's only partly accessible. But it's step-free to train, to platform, which means then you might need a manual ramp to board the train. Or you might need some assistance to board the train. If you tap on this one, this is again a type that's often difficult to understand. And in this app, you can just find it. It's step-free to platform, but only in one direction. So this is only for westbound. Only the westbound platforms are step-free to platform. So you can see how this information can get quite complex. And we spent a lot of time making it easier to understand and finding it in a way that's quite straightforward. Equally so, stations that are just not accessible but are part of a directional sort of, so it's the trains to bank, or it's the terminals that you still need to know about, but they are not necessarily accessible. Yes.
That's fantastic. Really, really interesting.
Reduced access. And I think the most exciting bit is really the live lift data as well. It's this live information that you get. Then I think another very important feature is that if you now have this switched on, so you are looking for a step-free journey, and you would like, say, to travel to, say, Green Park, and you go now and you have it switched on, the step-free mode is switched on. So the journey itself is now step-free to train.
Right.
So you now don't have to change that setting again because you changed the map to step-free. It changed the whole app to a step-free mode. And you out of the
Right.
box get step-free to train journey.
And it plans your journey accordingly, right?
Exactly. So this is now a step-free to train journey. In this case, then that's a bus journey because that is the most accessible mode in this case. And here you go, you have it right there, just because you change the map altogether to step-free mode.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. Other features in the app are also nearby buses, for example. Again, if you do have voiceover, this is a very good experience. You can get the arrival times for bus stops near you via voiceover very easily.
So the timings that you would normally see on the panel on the bus stop, you can see it through the app, or read it through the app.
Yeah, exactly. And another feature which is really easy to use and again works very well on voiceover is the status board. Yes. Do you have any other questions about the app itself?
I think this is perfect. Yeah, this is great.
Yeah, like I said, it would be great, to get feedback, more feedback. Certainly, like I said, we're very keen on improving what we're doing here.
And maybe could you show while you are on the screen how to get to the area where people can give feedback?
Yes. So if you had feedback, for example, let me just see. So if you had feedback, for example, for a particular station, you can go down here. You can say report an issue and go by that route. You can also always go in here and you see here in the menu, we have a feedback button. You can just email us.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you would like to share?
No, there's nothing about that. To share. Like I said, I'm looking forward to anyone reaching out to us. I hope you give it a try. And I hope it will be useful for you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Hanna, for sharing your experience, but also showing us this amazing app and also sharing different principles and different suggestions for commercial organizations to tackle accessibility and become more inclusive as well. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me. Thanks, Irina.
Thanks everyone for watching, and please go ahead and check out TFL Go app. I will add the link in the introduction below. And please go ahead and check out Inclusive by Design project on here on YouTube and also on Instagram and on Medium, where we share inclusive design and accessibility tips and different inspiration sources. Thank you all for watching and see you next time.